Foremost, thank you, Courtney, and thank you for hosting me in this lovely city. As Courtney articulated, my foremost objective here is to introduce the question itself. And I have to say, when it was first posed to me nearly a year ago, I was a little taken aback. Rarely do we meet people who want to challenge themselves foremost when confronted with concerning data. And I realized, though, in the history of social evolution and significant change, it's always been the leaders. It's always been the foremost leaders who have challenged themselves to face difficult inquiry and find workable solutions. Those solutions then can be adopted by other persons and other institutions in the hope of meaningful change. I tried to frame this in terms of a cultural context. About 50 years ago, Bob Dylan gave voice to a baby boomer generation who at the time thought they were revolutionizing social norm and cultural context. Today, new generations are further challenging these boundaries. This question itself is almost unimaginable 50 years ago. I think the natural response would be, of course, zoos and aquariums matter. They're fabrics of our society. They play roles in education. They play roles in conservation. However, increased transparency born of technological evolution and revolution has actually challenged those perceptions. Today, about 15% of the information presented in the media around zoos and aquariums has a negative sentiment to it. Persons are as likely to see stories about organizations, prominent organizations, suffering controversy, conflict, mortality issues. And in some cases, our commercial partners are further being challenged to update their business models. Just this morning, a significant member of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums announced a major restructuring in response to some political, media-driven, and in some cases, publicly motivated challenges. That begs one of the challenges itself, and that's that perhaps not all zoos and aquariums are equally relevant. Perhaps some indeed are leaders. Today, organizations such as the Monterey Bay Aquarium are at the forefront of policy innovation, sustainable seafood information and science. Here in Charleston, the South Carolina Aquarium has become a major epicenter for animal rescue and rehabilitation, serving a vital need along the Atlantic seaboard. In Baltimore, the National Aquarium is an innovator in public outreach to underserved audiences, making sure that future generations have access to the same education, the same conservation awareness that we've benefited from throughout our upbringing. And yet, these questions, these responses have not been deemed enough by many of our future audience members. Today, people say this new generation, these millennials, the largest generation in human history, outnumber, for context, baby boomers by almost 20 million people. They further challenge our enterprise, our traditional institutions, and say, how can you remain relevant to us in the future? Some of the data is alarming. In the last 11 years, the perceptions of animal care at major zoos and aquariums in the United States is in steep decline. It's in steep decline overall, but perceptually in steep decline amongst millennial audiences. Today, millennials are somewhat ambivalent about the idea that animals receive great care at zoos and aquariums. How can that be the case? How can places that are born of conservation, that have an animal care, rescue, and rehabilitation imperative, be perceived as having being less than excellent animal care? Further, the idea of animal rights and welfare has emerged. These questions were not raised in significant measure 20, 30, 40 years ago. Today, they dominate headlines, they dominate the psyches of our future audiences. Again, you see millennials with a perception that there is less awareness of concern and welfare. And this question does beg controversy, and it begs controversy perhaps because our membership has not responded in a way that's been proven credible. Yet another challenge, the idea of happiness. Increasingly, we recognize sentience in some of our species. And in that context, we challenge ourselves to recognize, are we doing better? And then further, are we doing the best we can? This is a question that John Rackham at the National Aquarium has challenged me with personally as we look for data to help inform their future planning strategies. For a long time, John's told me, we're doing well, we're doing well, we're doing good, we're doing very good. That shouldn't be our question anymore, John says. The question should be, are we doing our best? Can we do better for ourselves? Can we do better for our audiences? And can we do better for the species that we're trusted to care for? To me, that's one of the frameworks that we should address today. One of the ways we should answer, do we matter? Is how do we matter? And are we being responsive to what the market wants? This data indicates that our response is maybe not commensurate measure with the challenges posed by our audiences. And yet, there is an incentive, if not an imperative, for this change. The data also compellingly shows that our very solvency is at stake. Increasingly being good at your mission is very, very good for your business. We have some data that we very recently developed in the last year that gives us a long, sustained history in terms of reputational equities of aquariums. Reputational equities are a phrase that we use in data space to look at measures such as credibility, trust, reputation. In short, do we walk our talk? Do we practice what we preach? You see that recently there's a decline. What are the points of departure of decline? Are the presence of captive cetaceans in our organizations, dolphins, beluga whales. These have challenged, again, our audiences to fully embrace what we say we do and why we rationalize doing it. Are we truly conducting meaningful research? Are we truly saving these species? Are we truly fostering greater biological diversity? Are we supporting STEM standards? And if we're doing it, as John would say, are we doing it the best way possible? Are we doing our best? We also recognize the imperative change in the business model. If we don't improve these reputational equities, if we don't respond better to these challenges, our solvency is at stake, and we may not have a future that nearly is as robust and able to support this kind of enterprise. This shows an interesting dynamic. We see in the aquarium space organizations that keep captive cetaceans increasing their business challenge. Their ability to deliver upon their very mission is impugned by their presence of their collections that they endeavor to protect. This is a significant challenge. This begs some questions, which we hope to address today. How do we re-engage these populations that in some cases may be indifferent, worse yet, may be hostile? How do we redefine what we do as organizations? What we were as merely educators. I say merely, not that's not a meaningful function, but can we do more? Can we do better? Is that our best? If our role is as educators, how can we bring it to our audiences in a more meaningful, relevant fashion? And then lastly, we use words like conservation. Words that say so much but are so interpretive. They risk meaning nothing because they're so interpretive. How do we effectuate true change in conservation space, in research space? How do we better articulate our outcomes to a skeptical public? In short, that's what we're trying to answer today. Assembled before you today are truly some of the greatest minds. Futurists, practitioners, thought leaders. I think this question is a starting point for the conversation. I think it's a conversation that's probably long overdue. And again, from my perspective, one of the most interesting things that's being raised internally. This is not, I perceive, a response to public scrutiny. It's the very leadership that recognizes their importance and vitality to the future that's endeavoring to ask for this way.